Today I want to talk about API resources. This is an extension, you can think of it to Eloquent Models, that helps you translate maybe the default shape of your model with all of its properties into something more appropriate for an API response. Maybe you want to hide certain fields, maybe you want to rename them, maybe you want to bring in like related models and show those as sub-resources. All of this can be done cleanly with an API resource. So if we look at this example code, you'll see that I basically just return an array and I have all of the properties I want to return and then the values that are coming off of the model or off of related models, like this one is coming from location. So just take a look at this example because I'm going to use this to highlight a potential performance issue when you're dealing with collections of these resources. So for example, this resource is for a position, maybe a job position, and it has one or more locations, it has managers, and it has applicants that have been awarded that particular job. Now, one thing to point out, if you've never used API resources, this is not how I would normally do it. In fact, you can use resources for a location within this position resource. So normally you would abstract this and you'd have a location resource and a location collection, and you wouldn't have it in here. But just to make it a little more digestible for this simple demo, I pulled the logic right up into this one resource just so we can look at it and see it all in one place. So kind of take this in, and now if we switch over to the, let's go to the controller where we're using this. This is how we would use it. So this is an endpoint where I can search and filter and sort these different job positions. So basically I do a query, I pass a paginated query into a collection, and this will produce just a nicely structured JSON response using that resource definition that we just showed. But if we stop and think for a moment, there's a problem here. Remember, we have sub-resources which are using relations. That means we're going to have n+1 queries, right? So if our result returns 20 positions, every time it loops over one of those positions, it's going to have to go fetch the locations and the managers and the applicants, and that's a performance problem. So how could we solve that? Well, typically the way we would solve that is with eager loading. So I could do something like this, and this maps one-to-one with my resource. These are the things I need to return. And you'll notice this is interesting too, because remember in my resource, this was called awarded applicants. So I don't actually want all of them. I only want the ones that have the status of awarded. Now, this is fine. This works. This solves the n+1 issue. But it's not really the greatest solution in my opinion, because I have to first of all remember to do this, not just here, but any place that I'm going to be returning a collection of positions. And especially in this case, we have a little bit of logic. I'd have to repeat that in multiple places, which I typically don't like to do. It's less consistent. It's harder to maintain. So if we put this back the way it was, and if we look now at this position collection, so this is a method I made up, right? This is not coming from Laravel. This is not in the base class resource collection. I just made up this method. It's a static function, and I just call it apply eager load. And now I'm doing the exact same thing we were doing in the controller right here in this method. So if we combine these two things together, I could come down here now and I could say position collection, apply eager load, and we pass in our query. All right, so fundamentally, we've ended up with the same result, which is we're eager loading the related models, but now I've established a pattern, right? So any place that I'm using this position resource, I know I can just call apply eager load and load it up just the way I need it. Even better, across my resources in my collections, I know I just have a method. And in fact, you might even want to get in the habit using this approach of just calling the method, even if the method doesn't do anything, right? It's just sort of getting you in that habit to always apply eager loading when dealing with collections to avoid that n+1 problem. So this is something, again, not part of the framework specifically, but just a very easy pattern that you can layer on top to make your code more consistent, more maintainable, and to perform better.